I got the divorce papers while sitting in a sandbagged outpost in Syria. 13 years of marriage reduced to a PDF attachment. My name is Daniel Carter, 41 years old, Master Sergeant, 10th Special Forces Group. I'd been deployed for 5 months when my wife, Lauren, decided she was done. The subject line read, "Let's make this easy." The email itself was 4 sentences long. I filed the paperwork. I took what was mine from the joint account. I moved out. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I read it twice, closed my laptop, walked outside into the dry, scorching heat, and lit a cigarette. Staff Sergeant Reyes glanced at me from the Humvee he was working on. "You good, Sarge?" "Yeah," I said, exhaling smoke. "Just some bullshit back home." He nodded. That was the end of it. Military guys know when to leave things alone. Truth was, I wasn't surprised. 6 months before deployment, things had changed. Small things. Lauren stopped wearing her wedding ring to work. Started going out with friends I'd never met. New passwords on her phone. New late-night work meetings. I didn't confront her. Didn't snoop. That wasn't me. But I wasn't stupid either. So I made quiet moves. I moved my grandfather's war medals and my dad's old Colt .45 to a safe deposit box. Secured the deed to our house. Bought with my VA loan, my name only, in the same place. Opened a separate bank account and funneled a little of each paycheck into it. Not enough to notice, just enough to survive if things went south. The night before I deployed, Lauren kissed me on the cheek at the airport. "Stay safe," she said. Her eyes were dry, like she was saying goodbye to a coworker, not a husband heading to war. I should have known then. But part of me still hoped I was wrong. I wasn't. What Lauren didn't know was that I'd prepared for this moment. And what she didn't understand was that I never start fights. But I do finish them. 2 weeks after the email, I got a notification from our bank. $62,000 withdrawn. Our joint savings gone. I stared at my phone. The balance read $3.28. That night, I called the bank from the satellite phone in the command tent. The teller hesitated before telling me the withdrawals had started the day after I left. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. The last one, $50,000, had cleared yesterday. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. Then I pulled out my laptop and logged into our home security system. The cameras showed a strange BMW in the driveway. A man I'd never seen before walking through my living room, drinking from my whiskey glass. And Lauren, laughing on the couch like nothing was wrong. Something inside me shifted. Not anger. Something colder. 3 months later, I landed back in Colorado. I didn't tell Lauren I was coming. Instead, I checked into a motel under a fake name and called my old buddy, Mike, now a lawyer. We met at a diner outside Denver. "You look like hell," he said, sliding into the booth. "Feel like it." Mike handed me a folder. "You were right. She refinanced the house." I flipped through the documents. A loan application with my forged signature. "She pulled out $300,000, Mike said. "Used your VA loan as collateral." I exhaled slowly. "What else?" "Her new boyfriend? Jason? He's got a record. Fraud, embezzlement, and get this, he's done this before. Twice. Targets military wives, convinces them to drain assets, then disappears." I closed the folder. "What's my move?" Mike leaned forward. "First, you decide what you want." I already knew. I wanted my house, I wanted my money, and I wanted them to pay. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office and filed a fraud report. Then I went to the bank. The manager paled when I showed him my ID next to the forged signature. "I'll have to report this," he said. I already did. That afternoon, I got a text from Lauren. "What the hell are you doing? The bank froze everything." I didn't reply. 2 days later, Mike called. "Jason got pulled over in your truck," he said. "Driving on a suspended license. Cops found something interesting in the glove box." "What?" "Prescription pads from the hospital Lauren works at." I closed my eyes. She'd been stealing, and Jason had been using her. The FBI's involvement changed everything. Agent Vasquez laid out the case file across the metal table in the interrogation room. Photographs, bank statements, and a map with red pushpins marking similar crimes across 3 states. "We've been tracking this ring for 18 months, Vasquez said, tapping a photo of Jason. "He's small fish. The real prize is this man." She slid forward another photo. A silver-haired businessman named Richard Cole. Runs a real estate investment firm as cover. Specializes in targeting military families during deployments. I studied the documents. The scheme was brutally efficient. Befriend lonely spouses, manipulate them into draining accounts, then disappear with the money. Lauren had been victim number 12. "You're lucky," Vasquez continued. "Most victims come home to empty houses and maxed out credit. You caught it early." "What about Lauren?" I asked again. Vasquez exhaled. "Forensics show she signed those loan documents under duress. Jason threatened to release compromising photos unless she cooperated." The revelation hit like a gut punch. All those nights I'd lain awake imagining her betrayal, and the truth was, she'd been as much a victim as me. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. Lauren sat at the defendant's table, shoulders hunched, a shell of the vibrant woman I'd married. When they led Jason in, his cocksure smirk vanished when he saw the FBI agents. The judge sentenced Jason to 15 years for racketeering, fraud, and extortion. Lauren received probation and mandatory counseling. As bailiffs led Jason away, he locked eyes with me and mouthed, "This isn't over." After the hearing, Lauren approached me in the marble hallway. "Daniel, I never meant—" "I know," I cut her off. The anger had burned out months ago. "You should know. I'm contesting the divorce." Her breath hitched. "What?" "Not for us." I handed her an envelope. "VA benefits for spouses of disabled vets. You're still entitled, regardless of the divorce. Use it to start over." Tears tracked down her cheeks as she clutched the envelope. Somewhere along the way, I'd realized revenge wouldn't rebuild what was broken. But maybe mercy could plant new seeds. 3 months later, I was splitting firewood behind my Wyoming cabin when Rex's ears perked up. A black SUV crawled up the gravel drive. Vasquez emerged, her expression grim. "Cole made bail," she said without preamble, "and Jason's brother just visited him in prison. We think they're coming after witnesses." I set down the axe. The winter air crystallized my breath. "You think I'm scared of those pencil-pushing thieves?" Vasquez shook her head. "It's not you we're worried about. Lauren's gone missing." The pieces clicked with terrible clarity. They couldn't touch me, so they'd gone after the next best thing. My hands curled into fists. Some lessons needed teaching twice. The stench of gunpowder and pine sap filled my nostrils as I pressed Lauren deeper into the drainage ditch. Bullets kicked up dirt around us, the sharp cracks of rifle fire echoing through the mountain pass. I counted 3 shooters, professionals by their spacing and fire discipline. "Keep your head down," I growled, ejecting a spent magazine. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory from 100 firefights. The new mag clicked home just as muzzle flashes lit up the tree line. Lauren's breath came in ragged gasps. Daniel, I'm sorry. Not now. I popped up and squeezed off 2 rounds. A scream told me one found its mark. On my signal, we run for those boulders. The moment their fire slackened, I hauled Lauren up. We scrambled across open ground, rounds pinging off stone as we dove behind cover. Lauren's hands trembled violently around the pistol I'd given her. Listen carefully, I said, checking my remaining ammo. When I move left, you go right. Head for that stand of aspens and don't stop. Her eyes widened. You're splitting us up? Drawing their fire. I tapped my earpiece. Vasquez is 5 minutes out. The lie came easily. Our last comms had been spotty at best. Before she could protest, I was moving. A fusillade of gunfire tracked my progress as I zigzagged downhill. Pain lanced through my thigh, a grazing wound, but enough to send me tumbling into a dry creek bed. Above me, boots crunched on gravel. I rolled onto my back as Jason's brother loomed over me, his pistol aimed at my face. Special Forces, my ass, he sneered, finger tightening on the trigger. The gunshot came from behind him. His expression froze as a red bloom spread across his chest. Lauren stood 20 yards back, my pistol extended in a 2-handed grip, smoke curling from the barrel. The medevac helicopter's rotors kicked up a storm of pine needles as they loaded Jason's brother onto a stretcher. Vasquez stood beside me, her face grim in the flashing lights. Cole's plane took off from Billings an hour ago, she shouted over the rotor wash. Private charter to the Caymans. I watched Lauren being checked by paramedics. Her eyes met mine across the chaos, something unspoken passing between us. The marriage was dead, but tonight we'd buried its ghosts. Let him run, I said. Men like Cole always circle back to their money. Vasquez's lips thinned. You're not going to do something stupid, are you? I just smiled and limped toward the waiting SUV. The Mediterranean sun burned white-hot against the Monte Carlo skyline as I adjusted my sunglasses, watching Cole's yacht. The silver lining. Bob gently in the harbor. The man himself lounged on the aft deck, a cocktail in hand, surrounded by men who looked more like bodyguards than guests. I tapped my earpiece. You seeing this? Mike's voice crackled through. Clear as day. But we've got a problem. He's not boarding that jet alone. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the dock, and 2 figures emerged. One was Cole's lawyer, a slick-haired weasel I recognized from court documents. The other made my blood run cold. Jason. Not in prison orange, but a tailored suit, smirking like he'd already won. Son of a bitch, I muttered. He cut a deal. Or escaped, Mike said. Either way, this just got complicated. I watched as Cole clapped Jason on the back, like a prodigal son returned. They boarded the yacht, and within minutes, the engines rumbled to life. Change of plans, I said, tossing a handful of euros onto the cafe table. We're going fishing. The sport fishing boat Mike had secured wasn't built for stealth, but it would do. We kept our distance, blending in with the other pleasure crafts dotting the coastline. They're heading east, Mike said, binoculars pressed to his eyes. Not toward the airport. Then where? Only one place makes sense. Corsica. Cole's got a private airstrip there. No customs, no questions. I checked my watch. Vasquez? Still 2 hours out. We're on our own. The sun dipped below the horizon as we trailed, the silver lining into open water. Nightfall was both an advantage and a risk. Harder for them to spot us, but harder for us to track them. Then, without warning, the yacht's lights cut out. Shit. I grabbed the night vision goggles. The yacht was still there, but now running dark, veering off course toward a cluster of rocky islets. They know we're here, Mike said. Or they're paranoid enough to assume they're always being followed. I reached for the duffel bag. Time to improvise. Rain lashed against the yacht's windows as Cole clutched his bleeding shoulder, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within the cabin. Papers fluttering from the gunshot's concussion, the metallic tang of blood mixing with salt air. Jason gurgled on the floor, his hands pressed against the wound in his abdomen. "You bastard!" He managed to spit at Cole. I kept my weapon trained on both men while Mike secured the room. The yacht pitched violently, sending a champagne bottle crashing to the floor. Somewhere in the chaos, Cole's lawyer had fainted against the wet bar. "Vasquez is en route," Mike confirmed, wiping seawater from his face. "Coast Guard's got a cutter 10 minutes out." Cole's eyes darted to the spilled cash, then to the emergency raft strapped to the wall. I saw the calculation in his gaze, the wounded animal deciding whether to fight or flee. "You'll never make it," I said, shifting my stance as the yacht rolled. "Not in this storm. Not with that shoulder." His lips peeled back in a snarl. "You think this is over? I have friends in places you can't imagine." The radio crackled to life with a burst of static. "This is Captain Renault of the French Gendarmerie Maritime. Prepare to be boarded." Jason let out a wet chuckle. "Looks like your friends aren't coming." Cole moved suddenly, lunging for a drawer beneath the navigation console. Mike was faster, putting 2 rounds into the mahogany panel just inches from Cole's fingers. "Last chance," I said, stepping closer. "Hands where I can see them." The fight drained from Cole's posture. He sagged against the console, his designer shirt now more red than white. "You don't understand what you've done," he whispered. "This goes much higher than me." The Coast Guard cutter's floodlights turned night into day as they took Cole into custody. Medics worked on Jason while federal agents swarmed the yacht, collecting hard drives and documents from hidden compartments. Vasquez pulled me aside on the heaving deck. "Interpol's been after this network for years," she shouted over the wind. Cole was just the tip of the iceberg. Rain dripped from my brow as I watched Cole being led away in cuffs. What about his comment? About this going higher? She handed me a waterproof dossier. "See for yourself." The documents inside detailed shell companies stretching from Zurich to the Caymans, political contributions, and damning photographs of Cole with several high-ranking officials. My stomach turned at the implications. Mike joined us, his face grim. We just kicked a hornet's nest. 3 days later, we sat in a CIA safe house outside Nice, the Mediterranean sun a stark contrast to our mood. Vasquez paced before a wall covered in photos and string. "Cole's singing like a canary to save his skin," she said. "Turns out he was laundering money for half the organized crime syndicates in Europe." I studied a surveillance photo showing Cole with a Russian oligarch. And Jason? Critical condition, but talking. He's given us names of at least a dozen other military spouses they targeted. The door opened, and a familiar figure entered, Admiral Jameson, my former CO. His presence here meant this went deeper than we'd imagined. "Master Sergeant," he nodded, "you've stirred up quite the mess." The safe house was eerily silent after Admiral Jameson dropped his bombshell. Mike and I exchanged glances. This wasn't just about Cole anymore. This was a sanctioned op, and we'd been played from the start. "You knew Cole was targeting military families," I said, my voice low. "And you let it happen." Jameson's jaw tightened. "We needed evidence linking him to the oligarchs. The money trail leads straight to Moscow. This was bigger than one man's greed." Vasquez stepped in, her tone measured. "We have operatives embedded in 3 of Cole's shell companies. If we'd moved too soon, the whole network would have vanished. I tossed the dossier onto the table. So you sacrificed those families as bait? No, Jameson snapped. We intervened where we could, diverted funds, stalled foreclosures, but we needed coal to make a mistake. He pointed at me. You were the mistake. Mike let out a dark chuckle. Because he couldn't resist going after a special forces wife. Because he got sloppy. Jameson leaned forward. And now, thanks to you, we have everything we need to burn this operation to the ground. The room fell silent again. Outside, the Mediterranean wind howled against the reinforced windows. I looked at the map, red pins marking shell companies, blue for known associates, black for suspected hits. This was a spider web, and we just walked right into the center of it. What's next? I asked. Jameson smiled. Next, you go home. We'll handle the cleanup. I didn't trust that smile. The flight back to the States was long enough for me to replay every moment. Cole's yacht, Jason's betrayal, the way Jameson had looked at me like I was a pawn he'd already sacrificed. Mike dozed beside me, but I couldn't sleep. Something didn't add up. When we landed at Dulles, a man in a dark suit waited at the gate. Admiral Jameson's orders, he said, handing me a sealed envelope. Inside was a bank slip, $250,000 deposited into an offshore account under my name. Mike whistled. Hush money? No, I said, crumpling the paper. A trap. If they were paying me off, it meant they expected me to stay quiet. And the only reason to do that was if the operation wasn't really over. I pulled out my phone and dialed Vasquez. It went straight to voicemail. Mike's expression darkened. You thinking what I'm thinking? Yeah, I said. We're not done yet. Back in Wyoming, I expected to find peace. Instead, I found a break-in. The cabin door was slightly ajar, Rex nowhere in sight. I drew my sidearm and stepped inside, scanning for movement. The place had been tossed, drawers emptied, furniture overturned, but nothing was taken. They weren't here to steal. They were here to send a message. A single photo lay on the kitchen table. Me, standing on Cole's yacht, gun drawn, written on the back in red ink. You should have taken the money. Rex whined from the bedroom, locked in the closet but unharmed. I knelt beside him, checking for injuries. That's when I saw it. A tiny black device tucked into his collar. A tracker. I crushed it under my boot. They weren't just warning me. They were watching. The fishing shack reeked of mildew and rotting wood. Vasquez's laptop cast eerie blue shadows across her face as I stepped inside, my Glock still warm from the firefight at the motel. You're late, she said, not looking up. I took the scenic route. I kicked the door shut behind me. Had to lose a tail. She finally met my eyes. They're not just watching you, Carter. They're hunting. The laptop screen displayed a classified Pentagon file, Operation Midnight Tide. Names of high-ranking officials blinked red next to dollar amounts in Swiss accounts. At the center of the web sat Senator Richard Holloway, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. I exhaled sharply. Holloway? He's the one protecting Cole's network? Not protecting. Vasquez tapped a key, pulling up surveillance photos of Holloway meeting with Russian intelligence officers. Running it! A cold realization settled in my gut. This wasn't corruption. This was treason. The laptop pinged, an encrypted message. Vasquez paled as she read it. They found us! Headlights swept across the shack's broken windows. Glass shattered as the first flashbang rolled across the floor. I tackled Vasquez behind an overturned freezer as the concussion rocked the shack. Back door! I shouted over the ringing in my ears. Vasquez grabbed the laptop while I laid down covering fire. 3 silhouettes moved outside, professional hitters with suppressed MP5s. We burst through the rotten back wall into freezing river mud. Bullets chewed the wood where we'd been standing seconds before. The Potomac's black waters swallowed us whole. We surfaced a mile downstream, hypothermia setting in. The safe house was compromised, our contacts blown. Vasquez's fingers trembled as she dialed a memorized number on a burner phone. "Package secure," she croaked. "Need extraction." 2 hours later, an unmarked van scooped us off a rural highway. The driver was a grizzled vet, missing 2 fingers. Someone from Vasquez's Black Ops days. "Welcome to the shit show," he grunted, tossing us thermal blankets. "Holloway's people just raided the Pentagon's cyber division. They're erasing everything." I clenched my jaw. "We have copies?" Vasquez pulled a waterproof drive from her boot. "Every dirty transaction. Enough to start World War III if we release it." The van hit a pothole. Outside, snow began falling. Early for October. We holed up in a defunct missile silo in West Virginia. Holloway had gone on television, denouncing rogue elements, spreading disinformation. The manhunt for us was front-page news. Mike arrived at dawn, his left arm bandaged from a recent firefight. "They got to Admiral Jameson," he said grimly. "Car accident. Very tragic." Vasquez paced the concrete floor. "We have 2 options. Disappear forever, or we burn it all down," I finished. The drive contained enough evidence to collapse governments, but releasing it unprotected would get thousands killed in the chaos. I stared at the silo's rusted launch controls. There was a third way. 1 week later, an encrypted data packet hit every major intelligence agency simultaneously. Holloway's dealings, Cole's network, the Russian money trail. But with one critical difference: names of low-level operatives were redacted. Only the architects were exposed. The storm hit Washington like a hurricane. Holloway resigned mid-speech when FBI agents stormed the Capitol. 3 generals were arrested at Fort Bragg. And in a Wyoming cabin, I watched the fallout on a stolen satellite feed. Rex growled as headlights cut through the pines. I didn't reach for my weapon when the knock came. Vasquez stood on the porch, snow dusting her shoulders. "They're calling it the biggest intelligence leak since Snowden." I poured 2 whiskeys. "You here to arrest me?" She took the glass with a tired smile. "I'm here to say thank you. And goodbye." The unmarked jet took her away at dawn. Epilogue: The Quiet. Spring came late to the mountains. The VA checks still arrived, though under a new name. Rex and I spent our days fixing up the cabin, the nightmares coming less often. Then one morning, a postcard appeared in the mailbox, a Caribbean sunset with no return address. On the back, 3 words: "Justice served." V. I burned it in the wood stove, watching the flames lick at Holloway's smirking face on the morning news. Some wars never truly end, but sometimes you get to choose your peace. I turned off the TV and went outside, where the aspens were finally coming back to life.